And I think for Atlanta, if they do explore trade downs, so if Washington's at 2, maybe I don't see a 1-2 swap necessarily, but Houston at 3, if Houston wanted to move up after some talk about them maybe trading down, who knows? Potentially I could see it, or maybe the team that moves up to 3 could just try to leapfrog, like they go to 3 and then they go to 1. Maybe something like that could happen. San Antonio at 4 feels like the team that would be most probable to trade up if they actually do value Reese Shea as the true number 1 prospect as rumored. And for them specifically, I get it. I do get it. I get it because he has size. He's willing to play, a role next to a star. He did it all season long. If the handling develops over the course of time, over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the Spurs, that's a cherry on top of what they envision him being as kind of this 3-and-D guy with size next to Victor. I get it. So I think San Antonio would be the most likely team if there is a trade down from 1. Now, I've heard in the middle of the lottery, in the middle of the first round, that there are some other teams that are trying to trade up. I've heard the Cavaliers. They currently right now have the 20th pick in the draft. They're trying to move up. The Blazers with the 14th pick are trying to move up. The Raptors with the 19th pick are trying to trade up. I've heard those 3 teams specifically are trying to move into either the lottery or the top 10. Now, Portland already has the number 7 pick. Maybe they're the team that wants to trade up. Maybe Portland's trying to do, 7 and 14 to go all the way up to 1, or maybe they're trying to do 7 and 14 to 3 and then get to 1 or something like that. But let's go team by team there with Portland at 14, Toronto at 19, and Cleveland at 20. With the Blazers, who are you trying to target if they are indeed trying to trade up?
I would assume they're trying to get some perimeter size on the defensive end, wouldn't you? I mean, I don't know that the Jeremy Grant project long term is going to be the answer for them in terms of the cost, in terms of the fit with the guys that they have. I think offensively, he's sort of a weird fit with as sort of like a score first guy with really. I think this all kind of comes down to do they want to try to keep this triumvirate of small guards that they have? Well, with Scoot and Simon, I think Scoot Simons is sort of a question in and of itself. And then you factor in Sharp with it too. If you want to keep that group together, I think that poses the question of we'd better be pretty great at 4 and 5 defensively in terms of the size, because none of the 3 of those guys are plus defenders. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I'd assume they'd be after but also, I don't know that a Stephon Castle or somebody like that would be quite big enough. I would think that they would be after perimeter size and defense, wouldn't you think?
I would think so. I think I think it also depends on their own internal evaluation of Scoot. I mean, they had a year with him now. Do they view him as the leading face of the franchise, or do they view him as the second or third guy? I think that would possibly dictate if they're wanting to take a big swing, a big risk, or maybe add supportive pieces to help enhance him and lift him up as the star.
Mm-hmm. I think he's a second or a third guy. I've always thought that. But I mean, I think his destiny is probably to be a high level, second, third banana type guy. Because I just don't trust his decision making and scoring efficiency to be the thing that I'm just I'm for sure going to bet my life that this is a playoff team for the next 5 to 10 years where he's the centerpiece. I just don't, especially in the West. I mean, you could just say that in the abstract, but then when you say it not in the abstract where you're looking at the West, I'm just I don't see an offense like that. So I'm just trying to think they probably need shooting and play, and perimeter size. So I'm who is the most likely guy to do that among those? Holland's not going to shoot it well enough. I think if you throw him, he's mocked in some places to go there. I don't see that as being a thing. Buzelis is a really interesting possibility for them. What do you think about Buzelis with the Blazers in terms of checking the things that they need?
To me, he'd probably be number 1 on the board. And I think you have to get ahead of the Pistons at 5 in order to get Buzelis. I just think it's very unrealistic for Buzelis to fall past the Pistons with the 5th pick. So if it is Buzelis, then you do have to move into the top 4, and maybe that is Houston. And you mentioned the Anthony Simons, Scoot Henderson they're two small guards. Like you have to choose at some point between those guys. And maybe Houston, for all the talk about, Reed Shepherd going there, right? Like they want that next Fred VanVleet replacement because he's 30 years old. He's only got 2 years left on his contract. Maybe Anthony Simons could be the guy that fits that. Simons is still only 24 years old. Maybe Simons plus 7 and 14 for 3. Something like that. I mean, to me, that's an interesting offer. It's a bit rich, I think. But if there's a guy the Blazers are targeting and that they can't get at 7, then I could see that, having some appeal, and you can sprinkle in some salaries and other assets and all that going either way. But as a foundation of a deal, 3 for 7, 14 and Simons, I'm into that.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Charks used to say, if you draft one small guard, you're out of the small guard business. That was one of his maxims that I always thought was pretty true. Like, especially if they're a foundational piece. And I'm just thinking about the Rockets. Lately, I've heard a little bit of doubt cast on the Shepherd thing with the Rockets. We'll see if that's a smokescreen or not. But I still think they should take him. But yeah, if you think about like Jalen Green with Simons, what do you think about that pairing? We're getting into like team needs nitty gritty here now. I know, but yeah. What was the other team that you said? You said we were going to go through the 3 that you were.
The Cavaliers with the 20th pick. They are a team that they're everywhere. To be clear, they're everywhere. Nobody knows exactly what they're going to do between Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. There's some stuff out there about maybe they'll trade Jared Allen and have Evan Mobley be their 5. I think, you look at teams that need a center that are in the top 10 or in the lottery right now. I think, if I'm Cleveland, I'm offering Jared Allen to the Kings saying, hey, do you want a rim protector next to Sabonis? I'm offering him to the Grizzlies, who clearly need a 5. I'm offering him to the Spurs to say, hey, you want to have 2 bigs? Like, what do you think? Right. So I think for Cleveland, they're in a position where they don't exactly know what they're going to do. It's going to depend on what opportunities actually become available. But I am curious why Cleveland, a playoff team, would be trying to move up within the draft. I would think it's for a guy who's more on the NBA ready side than a raw swing, don't you think?
You would think so. I'm just trying to think of like what they played. Boston is just such a good team. If you think about like what they ran up against and how do they contend with that, they need more spacing, obviously, like they tried to import some of that with Strus and with George Niang. They tried to upgrade in those ways. Okoro has run into some problems playing him with Mobley and Allen. I just think, God, if they were going to send Allen to the Kings, I would wonder if it may be, I'm going to get Kings fans mad at me for saying this, but maybe even instead of Sabonis, if you think about it, Allen's not a horrible passer, and he gives you a little bit more.
He's a really good passer, man.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's just a thought, but we'll see if it's received well. But
J. Kyle Mann says Kings should trade DeMontis Sabonis for Jared Allen.
I'd be open to it. What are the Kings doing? I mean, they need to think about doing something. I think the Kings and the Cavs are in interesting sort of parallel, kind of like we need to do something. We have our core of what we like to do. Garland seems like the biggest trade chip to maybe pull that off. I did really like the idea of like Garland and Bridges, like making that move. I feel like you could get sort of a centerpiece guy to build around with Garland if you're the Nets. Bridges isn't necessarily that, but he does offer a lot. Cleveland, he'd be very attractive to me if I were Cleveland. Thinking about who they would want to pick, though, I just feel like who's going to make the big splash for them? Like, if there was a guy that I knew for sure was going to swing a playoff series, I don't think I'd have that mentality. I'd just be in the mentality of just try to get the best player available if I'm the Cavs, don't you think? Because I don't think there's a guy in that range that's like for sure going to shift who we are as a team. Do you think so?
No, I don't. And I think there's better fits. Like, I think there's guys who make more sense next to what they currently have. Like, I think somebody like Devin Carter makes more sense than Darius Garland because of the defense he provides. I think Dalton Connect makes more sense than Darius Garland because of the size and kind of, scoring mentality that he brings in a backcourt next to Donovan Mitchell. But that assumes Mitchell stays around. I think, like, if you're talking about guys in the front court instead of Jared Allen, if you're moving Mobley to the 5, I think there's a bunch of guys like, Tristan Da Silva. Gavoni reported today that his range starts at 12. So if Cleveland's at 20 and they want to have, big 6'9", versatile forward in the front court next to Evan Mobley, you might have to trade up to get that guy. So I think there's a lot of guys in this draft class that make sense as pieces next to the core guys that the Cavaliers have. And I think for the Raptors, it's a similar type of mindset there. Like, how are you going to optimize Scotty Barnes? Well, you traded for Emmanuel quickly earlier in the year. You drafted Grady Dick last season. To me, I think if it's the Raptors, there's been a lot of rumblings about Zach Edey as the guy for them at number 19. I find that a very interesting wrinkle because Edey is, to me, I'd want to see Edey in a situation with a quickly type, with that kind of pick and roll shooting, playmaking guy. Like, to me, that'd be pretty ideal, but I don't think they'd have to move up for Edey. So it would have to be somebody else.
Yeah, if I caught wind that they were after Edey, if I'm a team in that range, if I'm this, I'd sort of dangle that and try to squeeze them on that one. Yeah, the possibility of Edey with the Raptors is interesting. I think that would be. What do you think? Well, one more thing on the Cavs situation. What do you think about Filipowski with the Cavs? Putting him, you get a little bit of size. I thought he flashed some passing.
Do you have
in the
to
tournament.
move up for him?
Probably not. I mean, where did you have him in your last mock draft? He feels like he's in that 10 to 20 range, right? Or has he slipped beyond that at this point? Consensus.
I mean, I don't think anybody knows, to be honest with you. Just being real.
What even is consensus?
There's no consensus right now. I think there's I had Filipowski 31 in my latest mock, and that's probably too low. But somebody's gonna fall.
Yeah,
and maybe it'll be him.
Kentucky fans loved your rationale on that one with the Dillingham. I enjoyed sitting back and watching that one. Kevin brushed up against the BBN. That was a fun day for you, right?
I don't know. I didn't see any of it. What happened?
Oh, you responded. The thing where they were talking about somebody was gonna fall.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's ridiculous.
We're crazy. Ignore us, Kevin.
Yeah,
It's okay.
I mean, all you gotta do, like Rob Dillingham, clutch client. Look at what happened last year with Derek Lively. Derek Lively could have been a top 10 pick if Rich Paul and Clutch wanted him to be a top 10 pick. They refused workouts with teams. They steered him directly to Dallas because it was an ideal situation. They're going to do the same thing with Rob Dillingham. Of course, you'd love if a guy could be a top 3 or 4 or 5 pick, but I don't think that those teams are considering him. So maybe you do steer him to a team in the middle of the first round instead of the mid to late lottery if a team already has a guard or whatever. Like the Heat, would be a great fit in my opinion. But
for Dillingham, interesting. Yeah.
Pair
I like
with
that.
Bam Adebayo, 2-man game, DHOs with Bam. I'd be pretty ecstatic about what could happen there as a building block with Bam.
Yeah, I like that. Rob's got to be protected. I think that's one thing about these playoffs that I've just really been thinking about. It's just like if you're like an offense. I'm not going to say offense only, but offense mostly Rob type, which he is. How good do you have to be defensively around them to sort of allow that to exist in a playoff setting? And it's like skinny. I don't know. That Miami is interesting if you think about Jaquez and Bam, Jimmy, if he's even there. We'll see how that all shakes out. Yeah, that's an interesting fit for sure.